Tom Brady was sacked 565 times in his career, more than any quarterback in NFL history. Ask him about those hits and he shrugs them off. Ask him which players he actually feared getting hit by, and the list gets very short. 4 names, and one of them, Brady says, stood above the rest. Ray Lewis was at the top. Brady still jokes that one sack from a 2009 playoff game lives in his shoulder to this day. One hit, more than 15 years ago. But here is the part that should worry you. The men who faced Ray Lewis twice a year, every year, for over a decade, will tell you the hits were never the scariest part. To understand what was, you have to start with a play from 1997 that no coach ever drew up. Eric Metcalf was one of the most dangerous open field runners of his era. A Pro Bowl returner, the kind of pure speed that middle linebackers are not supposed to share a camera frame with. He caught a short pass against Baltimore, found a crease, and took off down the field. Ray Lewis was 15 yards behind him, 15 yards. Against that kind of speed, in the open field, that is not a pursuit. That is a formality. The play is over. Everyone on the field knows it. Lewis ran him down anyway. 50 yards later, he dragged Metcalf to the turf 12 yards short of the end zone. 25 teams had passed on Ray Lewis in the draft. Too small, the scout said. After that play, nobody ever said it again. But if you want to know what facing him actually felt like, on the ground, in the violence, you have to ask Eddie George. George was the ultimate power back. 6'3", 235 pounds, a man who punished tacklers for 4 quarters and never left the field. He and Lewis collided by George's own count more times than he can remember. This is how he described those Sundays. It was a fistfight from beginning until the end. And then this. It was a true spiritual battle. He knew I was getting the ball and I knew where he was going to be. It was just a matter of who was going to win this war. Notice what George is not talking about. He is not talking about bruises. He is not talking about pain. Remember the warning at the start of this video. The hits were never the scariest part. This is what the scariest part sounded like. A spiritual battle. A war for something you cannot tape up or ice down afterward. And on January 7th, 2001, Ray Lewis won that war in front of the entire world. Divisional playoff round. The top-seeded Titans, the favorites to win it all, against Baltimore. Fourth quarter, Titans driving, trying to claw back into the game. Steve McNair throws to the flat for George. Lewis arrives almost as fast as the ball does. George bobbles it. Lewis rips it out of his hands in midair, breaks a desperate tackle from George himself, and takes it 50 yards down the sideline. Touchdown. Season over. Listen to how Eddie George remembers that moment. It wasn't enough for him to just get the interception and kneel down. He had to put the nail in the coffin. He was about taking someone's will. That last phrase deserves a second look. Taking someone's will. That is not a description of a tackler. That is a Pro Bowl running back describing something that happened to him on the inside. And here's what it cost just to get even. 3 years later, the two men met again in the playoffs. George had dislocated his shoulder. Most players do not dress for that. George strapped the arm into a restrictive harness, walked onto the field anyway, and ground out 88 yards against that Baltimore defense, at one point running straight through Lewis on the sideline. The Titans won that day. Think about what that means. The price of beating Ray Lewis once was playing a playoff game with a dislocated shoulder. That was the exchange rate. And in the year 2000, Lewis set that exchange rate for the entire league at once. The numbers from that season still do not look real. The Ravens allowed 165 points in 16 games. the fewest in the history of the 16-game season. That is barely 10 points per Sunday for 4 straight months. They gave up 970 rushing yards for the entire year. There were individual running backs that season who gained more yards by themselves than the whole league combined managed against Baltimore. 4 times that year, opponents finished the game with 0 points, and in the middle of every one of those Sundays, calling the defense, flying to the football, stood number 52. That run ended in Super Bowl 35, where the Giants never scored a single offensive point. Ray Lewis walked off the field as Super Bowl MVP, one of the only defensive players in history to ever hold that trophy. That same season, he was named Defensive Player of the Year. He would win it again 3 years later. But the fear was never only physical. Quarterbacks around the league learned that Lewis studied film like a coordinator, and by Sunday, he was inside their heads. He would look across the line, read a formation, and call out the play before the snap. Then the play would happen exactly as he said. He read offenses the way Peyton Manning read defenses. For 17 years, every quarterback in the league had to live with that. The record book confirms how complete he was. Ray Lewis remains the only player in NFL history with more than 40 career sacks and more than 30 career interceptions. Nobody else has ever done both. 13 Pro Bowls, 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, 17 seasons, all of them in the same uniform. And then there was everything that happened before the ball was even kicked off. The dance out of the tunnel that turned 70,000 people into a single heartbeat. The pre-game speeches that teammates said felt less like football and more like church. "Any dogs in the house?" he would scream, and grown men, 10-year veterans who had seen everything, would answer him like rookies. Opponents standing on the other sideline had to watch all of it, knowing that everything they had just seen was coming directly at them for the next 3 hours. His final game tells you everything about how the story ends. Super Bowl 47, February 2013. Lewis had announced before the playoffs that this run would be his last ride. 4 games later, he was standing under the falling confetti, a champion, in the last football game he ever played. He walked into the Hall of Fame in 2018. First ballot, no debate. Dick Butkus defined the middle linebacker in the 60s. Jack Lambert redefined it in the 70s. Ray Lewis closed the argument. Same position, same job description, written in 3 different eras of violence. Stand in the middle of the field, see everything, and make every man who comes near the football regret it. Which brings us back to where we started. Tom Brady took 565 hits in his career and forgot almost all of them. One, he never did. It still lives in his shoulder more than 15 years later. The man who outlasted every defender the league ever sent at him, who feared almost nothing in 23 seasons of football, carries exactly one permanent reminder. That reminder has a name. So now the question belongs to you. 3 men, 1 position, 1 legacy of pure fear. Butkus, Lambert, or Ray Lewis? Who is the most terrifying middle linebacker in NFL history? Pick one and defend it in the comments.